The first letter came folded in a tacky pink envelope, sealed with a glitter sticker shaped like a sunflower. It was taped to my front door like some kind of middle school revenge note. Violation of HOA Code 7.3. Unauthorized property modifications. You are hereby fined $500. I blinked. Then laughed. I don't live in an HOA. My name's Damon Kessler. I'm a carpenter by trade, moved into my house on Maple Ridge 3 months ago. It's a single-story ranch with a wide driveway and a wraparound porch I built myself. I picked this place specifically because it wasn't under an HOA, which around here are run like miniature dictatorships. But that didn't stop Judith Newell. Judith was the president of the Maple Ridge Estates HOA, 3 blocks down and across the street. We're not even in the same zip code technically. But Judith, 50-something, blonde bob, always wearing a sun hat 2 sizes too big, decided I was visually connected to the neighborhood, whatever that means. She showed up the next morning while I was loading lumber into my truck. "You'll need to remove that pergola," she said, eyeing it like it was a rat nest. "It doesn't match the approved exterior materials." I wiped my hands on my jeans. "You're not my HOA president," I said. "I'm not even in your HOA." She pointed to the curb. "You use the same street we do. That makes you subject to our community aesthetic standards." I stared at her, trying to figure out if she was serious. "I don't pay dues. I wasn't given any covenants. I bought my property outright, outside your jurisdiction. You have no legal authority over this house." Her lips tightened into a line sharp enough to slice siding. "You'll be hearing from our attorney." 3 days later, I did. Judith filed a civil complaint against me in small claims court for violating HOA codes and refusing to comply with warnings. She was suing me for $500 and demanding I remove my pergola, repaint my garage door, and I kid you not, reconsider landscaping choices that clash with community cohesion. I sat in my truck for 5 minutes just rereading the papers. Then I glanced at the security camera mounted under my gutter, the same one that caught her trespassing on my property last week to measure my lawn. She messed with the wrong guy. I've worked with zoning boards for years. My buddy, a land use attorney, helped me go over every inch of my property deed when I bought the place. And Judith, she didn't just file a bogus lawsuit, she committed fraud. I spent that night digging into the HOA's bylaws, public property maps, and county records. I even found an old PDF of the original HOA charter buried in the city's archives. What I found made my heart race. Judith had overstepped her authority big time, not just with me, with everyone, and I was going to prove it, legally, publicly. And loud enough that the entire Maple Ridge Estates Board would never forget it. The courthouse was quiet that morning, the kind of quiet that made you hear your own boots on the tile like a drumbeat. I walked in wearing my work clothes denim shirt, tool belt still clipped to my hip, not out of defiance, but because I had a job site to visit right after I finished dismantling Judith's little empire. I wasn't alone. My friend Cody, a land use attorney with a dry sense of humor and a memory like a filing cabinet, walked beside me with a binder thicker than a city zoning manual. Because that's exactly what it was. "This is the most absurd case I've seen filed since the guy who tried to sue a raccoon for property damage," he said, flipping through his notes. "Judith's overreaching by a mile. She attached a map drawn in pen, on notebook paper. She sent it taped to my garbage can last night," I said. "Right next to a note about my porch light being too aggressive, whatever that means." The clerk called our case. We stepped into the hearing room. It was small, bare walls, 2 rows of benches, and a judge who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Judith was already there, seated at the plaintiff's table, surrounded by 2 of her HOA board members. One of them, a guy in a tight blazer and unnecessarily shiny shoes, was flipping through a manila folder stuffed with what I assumed were infractions. Judith didn't look at me. But her jaw was set like a brick in wet cement. The judge barely glanced up. "Plaintiff, your complaint," Judith stood, clutching her folder like it held national secrets. Your Honor, the defendant has repeatedly refused to comply with Maple Ridge Estate's HOA regulations. His property is visible from our common use areas and therefore negatively impacts our community standards. We issued him 2 written warnings and a formal fine, which he has ignored. The judge squinted. Is the defendant a member of the HOA? Judith's tone didn't waver. Not formally, but the HOA charter extends conditional authority over properties adjacent to our boundary lines. We believe this creates a legal obligation for external compliance. Cody leaned over and whispered, "She just made that up. That's not a thing." The judge blinked slowly. "You believe that?" Judith nodded. "Yes, Your Honor, our community's cohesion depends on visual integrity. Otherwise, what's the point of an HOA?" I stood. "Your Honor, may I respond?" The judge motioned lazily. "Go ahead." I pulled the binder from Cody's hands and opened it to the first tab. I've included my property deed, the original HOA charter filed with the county, and the boundary maps from the Office of Land Use. My property sits entirely outside of the HOA's jurisdiction, not partially, entirely. I handed over a highlighted map. These are the official survey lines. County approved. There is no legal or contractual obligation between me and the HOA. In fact, the charter Judith just referenced expired 5 years ago and was never renewed per the county's own records. Judith's eyes narrowed, but she didn't move. I flipped to the next tab. Additionally, I'd like to submit video footage of Mrs. Newell and 2 members of her board entering my property without permission. One of them used a measuring tape. This footage was captured by a motion-activated camera under my eave, time-stamped and dated. The judge tilted his head. "They entered your property?" "Yes, sir, on 3 separate occasions. I've filed a report with the county sheriff as well, trespassing and attempted property tampering." Cody spoke next. "Your Honor, we also found evidence that the plaintiff mailed formal-looking fine notices to 3 other non-HOA residents who live outside the association's boundaries. We've brought written statements from 2 of them. One paid. That got the judge's attention. She collected money from someone not under her jurisdiction. $150. We have the canceled check. She deposited it into the HOA's operating account. The temperature in the room dropped. Judith's lawyer, if you could call him that, stood, looking like he just discovered his shoelaces were tied together. "Your Honor, the HOA believed it was acting within its extended charter rights. At worst, this is a misunderstanding." The judge closed the binder and rubbed his forehead. "This isn't a misunderstanding. This is fraudulent enforcement of non-existent authority. The civil complaint is dismissed. Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to the County Office of Civil Governance and the District Attorney's Office for review of unlawful fines and deceptive practices." Judith sat down hard. Outside the courtroom, Cody chuckled and lit a toothpick between his teeth. "You know what the DA's office is gonna do with this, right? Start digging," I said. And dig they did. Within a week, county investigators began sifting through Maple Ridge Estate's financial records. Turns out, Judith and her board had been issuing compliance penalties to properties along the perimeter of the neighborhood for over a year. Most of them weren't in the HOA. They'd been threatening liens, using fake legal stationery, and cashing checks into a discretionary fund labeled Community Integrity Projects, which, as it turned out, paid for Judith's new patio extension and a landscaping job at her board vice president's house. 3 residents came forward with letters demanding payment for vague offenses like improper mailbox symmetry and unsanctioned garden decor. None of them were ever informed they weren't technically under HOA jurisdiction. Judith had been calling it a buffer zone. The DA's office didn't find that term amusing. 2 weeks after the court date, I got a call from Marisol, a woman who lived 2 doors down from me. She'd received one of the fake fines last fall and paid it out of fear of having a lien filed on her home. I showed her the documents we filed and she nearly cried. "They made me take down my daughter's swing set," she said, said it blocked the community's line of sight. I gave her a copy of the complaint the county filed against the HOA. She read it twice, then asked if I could help her put the swing set back up. By the end of the month, 5 homeowners had joined together to file a civil suit against Judith and the board for fraud and emotional distress. A 6th joined after discovering that their backyard shed had been spray painted with the words "non-compliant" in white paint. County investigators traced the paint to receipts in the HOA's discretionary fund ledger. Judith was arrested for fraud and trespassing. 2 board members stepped down immediately. The 3rd tried to claim ignorance, but the email threads retrieved during the investigation showed otherwise, and the HOA dissolved. The county terminated its charter pending a full audit and reauthorization vote, which, as of now, hasn't happened. The neighborhood elected a temporary resident committee to handle basic maintenance, and they've made it clear: no more unsolicited citations, no more fake fines, and no more buffer zones. As for me, I finally finished the pergola, painted it a bright cedar red just to twist the knife. Every time I sit under it with a cold drink and a view of my now fully legal property line, I remember the look on Judith's face when the judge said the word fraud. I didn't just beat the HOA, I buried it. The morning after the HOA was officially dissolved, my porch was lined with folding chairs. Not mine neighbors. They started showing up around 7, some with coffee, others with lawn chairs and kids in tow. Marisol brought donuts. One guy, Wes from 3 houses over, brought a Bluetooth speaker and played classic rock like we were tailgating the end of an era. They weren't here to celebrate me. They were celebrating being free. I watched from the top step, arms crossed, as people swapped stories, real ones. Things they'd kept quiet about for months, even years. One woman in a faded flannel said she stopped planting vegetables because Judith once told her tomato cages were an eye-level hazard. Another guy admitted he repainted his fence twice in the same month because he got 2 conflicting color violation notices, each signed by a different board member. No one had ever questioned it, not until now. Why didn't anyone speak up sooner? I asked. Wes leaned back in his chair, arms behind his head. Most of us figured it was just easier to go along with it. You were the first one who didn't. I didn't say anything. Just nodded and handed him a bottle of water. Later that afternoon, I got a call from Detective Alton, the county officer assigned to the fraud case. He sounded like he hadn't slept. "We got the preliminary financials," he said. "It's worse than we thought." He didn't pause for drama. Just listed it off, tone flat and clipped. Over $30,000 in unauthorized fines collected from non-members. At least 4 separate home improvement projects billed to the HOA's discretionary fund, each one benefiting a board member personally. There's even an invoice for a private security camera system installed at Judith's house, paid for with HOA dues. I took a breath. What's the next step? There's going to be a formal indictment hearing. We've already served warrants for document seizure. And there's something else. He hesitated just for a second. We found tampered ballots from last year's board election. Someone rigged the vote. That caught me off guard. Why? She was already president. Looks like she lost, but the results were never posted. We found the originals in a locked drawer at the HOA office. She falsified the numbers and shredded the real ones. I stepped off the porch, pacing the edge of my lawn. Can that be prosecuted? It's election fraud. Even if it's not state level, it's still a felony under community governance laws. The DA's office is preparing charges. By the time I hung up, my adrenaline was back. I wasn't done, not even close. That evening, I stopped by the old HOA office, a small space that used to be a community pool supply shed, converted into their administrative hub. The county had already posted a notice on the door, "Closed pending investigation." But the lock was new, industrial grade. And the security camera above the door blinked red. I turned and spotted a familiar figure across the street, standing by a silver SUV. It was Alan, the former treasurer of the board. He looked thinner than I remembered, like the whole mess had aged him 10 years in a week. He saw me and walked over slowly. "I didn't know," he said before I even opened my mouth. "I swear to you, Damon, I didn't know about the money." "Then why didn't you stop the fake fines?" "I thought they were legit. She told us the charter had been extended by a legal review. Said we were just bringing in outliers for the good of the neighborhood." "You didn't check the paperwork." She said it was confidential, that the county hadn't finalized the filing. I studied him. He looked wrecked, not guilty, just broken. "She lied to all of us," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "I quit after she made me sign off on that landscaping budget. I knew it wasn't for the park." I nodded. "You willing to testify?" Without hesitation, he nodded. "Yeah, I've got copies of everything she made me sign. I kept backups. I didn't know who to give them to." I gave him Detective Alton's number and watched him walk back to his SUV with a kind of quiet relief I hadn't seen on anyone involved in this yet. He wasn't a victim, but he wasn't the villain either. 2 days later, I was subpoenaed to testify at a grand jury hearing. I wore the only blazer I owned and brought the original footage from my security cam unedited, time-stamped, backed up 3 different ways. The prosecution team walked me through every detail, from the fake citations to the trespassing. I didn't embellish. I didn't need to. Judith's actions spoke for themselves. The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Felder, asked one final question before I stepped down. "Why did you decide to fight back?" I thought for a second. "Because someone had to. And I figured if someone was going to peel the paint off this operation, it might as well be a carpenter." The grand jury returned 5 felony counts against Judith: fraud, theft by deception, election tampering, criminal trespass, and misuse of public funds. The judge signed off on an arrest warrant that same day. They picked her up at a golf club in a neighboring county. She was halfway through an iced tea on the patio when they cuffed her. News spread fast. Local outlets picked up the story. HOA president indicted after targeting homes outside jurisdiction. The photo they used was a blurry shot of her being led into a cruiser, sun hat in hand, expression somewhere between disbelief and fury. But the real fallout happened in the community. Property values stabilized. Residents started repainting their homes in whatever color they liked. Marisol got her daughter's swing set back up, and this time she added a tire swing for good measure. Wes built a fire pit out back and started hosting weekend cookouts. People waved more, talked more, trusted more. And the best part? The former HOA board was barred from holding any leadership position in a community organization for 5 years. That was part of the settlement agreement brokered by the county. With Judith gone and her grip broken, the neighborhood didn't fall apart. It got better. One afternoon, about 3 weeks after the indictment, I got a knock on my door. It was a teenager, maybe 16, tall, awkward posture holding a clipboard. "Hi. My mom said I should ask if you'd be willing to help us organize a volunteer cleanup for the park. It's kinda overgrown and we figured. You know, people might want to pitch in." I glanced past him, saw a few other kids raking leaves and trimming branches already. "You don't need a permit or anything," he laughed nervously. "No, we checked with the county. It's public access now. No one owns it." I nodded and grabbed my gloves. As I walked with him toward the park, I thought about everything that had happened: the pink envelope, the courtroom, the binder full of lies. And I thought about how close this place had come to being swallowed by someone's obsession with power disguised as aesthetic standards. But now it was ours, and not a single fine in sight. The county hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning, and by the time I pulled into the administration building's parking lot, the media vans were already there. Not just local stations, either. A regional network had parked a satellite truck outside, their reporter rehearsing lines in front of a mounted camera. I didn't slow down. I wasn't there for interviews. I was there to finish what I started. Inside the hearing room, the air was stale and tense. The county had convened a formal oversight committee to determine whether criminal charges beyond the existing indictment would be pursued against Judith Newell and the now defunct Maple Ridge Estates HOA. It wasn't just about fraud anymore. The financial audit had revealed something a lot more serious, something that could land more than one board member behind bars. I took a seat near the front. To my left sat Marisol, her hands folded tightly in her lap. To my right, Cody whispered, "They're not going to keep this quiet. Not anymore." "You ready for what comes next?" I nodded. I didn't drag this mess into the light just to walk away halfway through. The committee chair, an older man with a sharp gaze and a reputation for not tolerating nonsense, opened the session. "This hearing will determine whether the actions of the former Maple Ridge Estates HOA constitute criminal conspiracy, misappropriation of public funds, and obstruction of county governance." No one from Judith's former board had shown up in person. Their legal counsel sat stiffly in the front, flipping through a folder that looked a lot thinner than ours. The first witness called was Alan, the former treasurer, who'd already handed over signed affidavits and financial records. He took the stand with a visible tremble in his voice, but his testimony was clear. She told us the external fines were part of a pilot program approved by the county. Said we could collect from non-members as long as we kept it under a certain amount and didn't issue liens. I asked for documentation. She said it was verbal authorization. I believed her. Felder, the county prosecutor, tapped her pen once against the desk. "Mr. Givens, did you ever see a written contract or memo from any county official approving this program?" "No," he said. "Not once. Were funds collected from individuals who were legally outside of the HOA's jurisdiction?" "Yes." "And where were those funds deposited?" "In the HOA's general account." "But later, some were moved into a separate fund labeled Outreach. I didn't have access to that ledger." Felder didn't need to press further. The implication was clear. The next witness brought a different kind of weight. Her name was Tasha Nguyen, and she worked as a junior accountant at the contracting firm Judith had used for community improvement projects. She looked nervous but determined, like someone who'd been waiting a long time to speak. "I processed 3 invoices labeled as common area beautification," she said. "But when I visited the job sites to verify work orders, I realized all 3 addresses were private residences. One belonged to Judith Newell, one to her vice president, and the third to someone listed as a consultant, but the address matched a property owned by her nephew." The room went still. "They were billing personal home renovations to the HOA?" asked the chair. "Yes, sir. New decks, lighting fixtures, even a hot tub installation. The contractors thought it was above board because they were being paid on time and the checks cleared." The chair turned to Felder. "Are we looking at embezzlement?" "Yes," Felder said, "and possibly tax fraud." The funds were reported as maintenance expenses, but the materials were never logged as depreciable assets. "We're coordinating with the State Revenue Office." That was the moment the hearing shifted from procedural to explosive. The final witness was Detective Alton. He didn't bring drama. He brought evidence receipts, emails, digital correspondences, all obtained via warrant. He confirmed that Judith had not only rigged board elections and fabricated citations, but that she had also run a shell company registered under her cousin's name to funnel reimbursement checks back to herself under fake vendor listings. The HOA hadn't just overreached. It had become a criminal racket. The total estimated misappropriation exceeds $85,000, Alton said. That includes fraudulent fines, misuse of dues, and payments to fictitious contractors. We've confirmed at least 9 homeowners paid fines under threat of legal action. None of them were HOA members. We're pursuing full restitution. When the committee recessed for deliberation, the room buzzed like a storm about to break. Reporters scribbled notes, homeowners exchanged wide-eyed glances, and the legal counsel for the former board packed up without saying a word. Outside the building, I stood with Cody and Marisol near the steps. She was silent for a long moment, then said, "I didn't think anyone would ever believe us. I thought we'd just keep getting letters until we gave up. They believed when the proof hit the table, I said. That's the difference between suspicion and conviction. When the committee returned, the chair didn't waste time. We find sufficient cause to recommend expanded criminal charges against Judith Newell and former Maple Ridge Estates board members, including felony embezzlement, conspiracy to defraud, and obstruction of county oversight. Further, we are recommending civil forfeiture proceedings against assets purchased with misappropriated funds. It was done. Official, legal, unmistakable. Back in the neighborhood, things didn't return to normal. They found something better. The Temporary Resident Committee held a public vote on whether to reinstate the HOA under new leadership and revised bylaws. The result was unanimous: dissolve it permanently. The park was reopened as an independent community space under county maintenance. Someone donated benches. Someone else painted a mural on the old HOA office wall, a bright, swirling design of flowers, tools, and a scale tipped toward justice. One evening, I was installing a new fence panel on the south side of my property when a car pulled up and parked halfway across my driveway. I wiped my hands and turned. A woman stepped out. Late 30s, dark coat, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Kessler, I'm with the County Office of Residential Affairs. I was assigned to follow up on the Maple Ridge Estates case and facilitate the restitution process." I nodded. "You're here about the money they stole, partly. But also to let you know that, thanks to your testimony and documentation, we've flagged 2 other HOAs in the county with similar patterns. We're launching audits into both." I raised an eyebrow. "You think this was a template?" She nodded. "Judith didn't invent this. She just got caught first." She handed me a form. "If you're willing, we'd like to consult with you and your attorney as part of a task force. We're drafting new county standards for HOA governance. Your case is being used as the model." I took the form, glanced it over, and said, "Send me the schedule. I'll be there." That night, I sat on my porch with a cold drink and watched the sun dip behind the tree line. Across the street, Wes was stringing up lights between 2 trees while his kids ran circles around him. A few houses down, Marisol waved from her front yard, her daughter's swing set now surrounded by planters, and a wind chime someone had made out of old garden tools. Peace didn't mean everything was perfect, but now it was honest, free, ours. The woman who tried to steal that from us had been dragged into the light, and the community she thought she could control had stood up, spoke out, and pushed back, and I kept every letter she ever sent me. Not out of spite, out of memory, because sometimes the best way to keep your home safe is to remember exactly who tried to take it.